I'm now joined for a coffee with the editor with Mike Daniel, who is based here in South Africa, and Charlie Foskett, who is in the States. And the conversation that we're going to be having now is all about the RailRunner, or RailRunner as a system that is soon to be implemented here in South Africa. The concept of RailRunner, for those who perhaps don't know about it.
Well, Philippa, let me say that the first thing is it's a different type of approach to intermodal. It does not require heavy lifting cranes, and it doesn't require expensive terminals. And we use the slogan "Terminal Anywhere" to describe the type of system that it is. And basically, instead of having a rail car, and which you use a crane to lift a truck or a container and put it on top of the rail car, the trailer itself becomes part of the rail car. So RailRunner South Africa will manufacture a bogie, which is a sort of a wheel set for the front and the back of the trailer. And it also manufactures a bespoke trailer that is specially designed to be used both on road and rail. So this means that when one builds a train, it's a simple drive on, drive off proposition. It's as easy as backing into a loading dock, and virtually any truck driver can do this.
So what is the changes from like our typical rail trailer? I mean, what is the change that you've had to make there physically?
There are really, well, first of all, in South Africa, there's no typical rail trailer. South Africa, because of its gauge, because of the Cape gauge, can only carry containers on rail. With RailRunner, this is a revolutionary change. With RailRunner, they can carry both containers and can carry trailers, such as curtain side or hard side, or even ore carriers, the big tippers. They can also go onto rail. So this is a dramatic revolution for South African transport. So getting back to your question, the differences are three, basically. One difference is there's a special connector at the front of the trailer and the back of the trailer that permits the trailer to be connected to the bogie when the trailer is backed up onto the bogie. Okay, it's a special locking pin system to keep it safely connected. The second thing is, since all the bogies use air brakes, there has to be an air pipe or an air connection from the front to the back of the trailer so that the air brake pressure can be propagated along the entire train. And the third, which is really the most critical and is the most, how can I say it, the most technically challenging, is to make the trailer strong enough so that it can handle the longitudinal forces on the train. Trailers in general are designed to handle vertical loads. There certainly is a longitudinal force when the trailer slows down or when it accelerates on the road, but it's usually one, maybe two trailers at most. But on a RailRunner train, you can have somewhere between, I'd say 40 and 60 trailers, depending upon particular circumstances. And so at some point, the trailers that are in the front of the train, when the train is braking, get the forces from all the trailers in the back. So you have to have the intrinsic strength in the trailer to handle that. Now, that's in concept very simple. You just make a bigger trailer. But if you make a bigger, stronger trailer, it's heavier and you can't carry as much payload. So the technology challenge is to design a strong trailer that can still carry the payload. That's what we've been working with our partner Paramount Trailers to achieve this in South Africa.
All right, and then how much time have you had to spend on making sure that this was in line with the axle restrictions we may or may not have on our track here in South Africa?
Well, let me mention that we have a standard gauge rail track in the U.S. And we have typically, I'll say 25-ton axles, 25 metric ton axles.
Mm.
In South Africa, you have a Cape gauge, which is a much narrower track on your Transnet's freight rail system,
Mm.
and typically on the, I don't know exactly the correct phrase, but I'll say on the normal track, not the heavy haul, but the normal track, it's a 20-ton per axle system. Okay.
Okay.
So we went through an extensive design in the U.S. to redesign the system so it could fit on the South African gauge, both from a weight viewpoint and from a size viewpoint, making it all narrower and fit into a narrower space. The thing is that in the US, our engineers don't have South African nuts and South African bolts and whatever the other things are that are used in the South African rail system.
Yeah.
So we entered into a partnership with TMH, originally DCD Dorville, but now known as TMH Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and transferred all of our technology to them. And they have been going through a process of homologation, which means making it exactly the way it would be made in South Africa. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's it's been a long process. It's a complicated process, but we're making good progress.
Fantastic. So whilst we're talking about the process that you guys have embarked on, let's just talk about the journey from like when Mike first presented this, and I think this was at my event, Railways and Harbours, what was that, 2009? And
right.
Certainly in the last, let's just say, 2 years, quite a lot has happened. So vigorous testing with Transnet. When did you guys sign that initial agreement with Transnet?
Well, it was a long process. Mm-hmm. And I think I should start by saying that Mike Daniel is really the father of bimodal in South Africa, okay? Because he brought RailRunner to South Africa. He has created the local demand inside the rail community. He pioneered the relationship with Transnet, and he also obtained the, how can I express it, symbiotic relationship that we have with the various technology partners in South Africa. So even though a large part of this technology relationship has been based in the US, it's really been driven by Mike in South Africa, okay? So the first 5 years or so after 2009 was spent mostly by Mike evangelizing the whole concept in the rail community so that people in Transnet would actually understand it and talk about it. And I can clearly remember the first day that he brought us to Robert Froling, who's the chief mechanical engineer at Transnet, and we said, we'd like to do this, but we don't have a standard. We don't have there's nothing there are no specifications that we can work against. And Mike and Robert Froling worked out the development of the first bimodal standard by Transnet. Oh. So those things, that all took a while, okay? And I think it was Mike, it was 2016 that we finally, after they went through 3 tender processes, which each took at least a year, where we had to put together like a 150-page response to their request. And then eventually around 2014, a team of a dozen or so Transnet executives came to the US to kick the tires and verify the technology and so forth. And then finally, we went through a lengthy term sheet negotiation, and then an agreement which we signed roughly in 2016.
7th of September, Charlie.
7th of September, too. Yeah. So once that was signed, that put us in a position to accelerate the process, okay? And that's why you noted in the last few years there's been a big acceleration.
Yeah.
And so Mike secured for us, I don't know if secured is the right word, but we developed the relationship with TMH Africa and with Paramount Trailers, and and in both of those cases, it's a very technical relationship. And we have been working on transferring the technology to these companies so that they are essentially a RailRunner manufacturer in South Africa at the end of the day. And we still have some review and analysis to go through with Transnet. We're well along the path. And then when we get to a point where they have reviewed all of the design work that we've done, we'll build the first prototypes to be tested at Kudasport.
What's the time frame looking like? Or still unknown?
Well, you know, we have an emotional target here of testing before the end of this year in Kudasport. So I mean, given the current circumstances, it's very hard to say what's going to happen, because I mean, even if we were ready to build prototypes today, we couldn't tell you when that would start because people aren't able to go to work. So this is not something that's only in South Africa. This is all over the world. So it's hard to forecast that. But we would certainly expect to be, you know, on the rail sometime in 2021.
Our surrounding neighbors, certainly in, you know, Southern Africa, for example, what are the opportunities for us to do the same, you know, connecting to Zimbabwe or Botswana or Namibia or any of these other countries using the same kind of formula? So taking trucks off the road in general.
First of all, say that RailRunner South Africa is the official technology licensee and manufacturer for all of the SADC territories. When we are on the rail in South Africa, we will be able to go into all of these other countries as well. And some of these countries right now are at the point where they are prohibiting trucks from, you know, from traversing across their territory. So there's going to be a huge pressure to move from road to rail. You know, with our bimodal technology, RailRunner South Africa is going to be able to provide that service both for containers and for trailers of almost any kind. In other words, any vertical market that trucks operate in can be applied to RailRunner, and those trucks can be moved. It doesn't matter whether it's mining or farming or refrigerated goods or fast-moving consumer goods. All of these trailers can be built to operate on RailRunner.
All right, so I think from the perspective of, you know, the logistics industry and certainly, you know, truck operators, for example, I don't necessarily see this as a doom and gloom prospect for them. I think this is an amazing opportunity to firstly decrease their operating costs because, you know, it is more economical to move by rail, but also in the end improve overall logistics because you pick it up on the other side and you deliver door to door. I think this is an incredible opportunity. Is the trucking industry concerned about this move?
Well, first of all, let me say that from my perspective, the people that we've met have been very receptive. Okay. And, you know, Mike has coined the phrase that RailRunner South Africa is bringing economic freedom to all in South Africa. And it really derives from something that you specifically touched on right now, which is the high cost of logistics in South Africa. The logistics cost of transportable goods in South Africa is something like 50% of the transportable GDP, which is a huge number. Okay, absolutely huge number. And so with RailRunner, we have the opportunity to lower the logistics cost by somewhere between, I would say, 20 to 30% over time. Okay, which is fantastic. And so what is RailRunner going to do for the South Africa logistics industry and industry in general? Well, first of all, there's a well understood study in the US that indicates when you build an intermodal terminal, you can create somewhere between roughly 25 and 100 jobs per 1,000 TEU per year that you move through that terminal. That means that in the vision that RailRunner South Africa has, over a 5 or 6 year period, we can generate somewhere between 80,000 and maybe 300,000 jobs associated with intermodalism, which is a huge factor. Okay.
Mm.
But we can also, by lowering the logistics costs, moving that from 50% to somewhere substantially lower, we're going to make South African companies much more competitive in domestic and international markets. So it'll benefit your export balance of payments.
Mm.
And secondly, it's going to make imported goods for consumers also less expensive. And this has a very broad economic impact. And I think finally, the availability of lower cost logistics, lower cost cargo transportation is going to create tremendous opportunities to build new businesses in areas where you have workers and resources, but no access to transportation. One of the things that jumped out at me, and you or Mike might correct me if I recall this incorrectly, but I think that something like 95% of your domestic coal consumption is delivered by road. Okay, and from what I understand, there are two classes of miners in South Africa. There are the big companies, and then there's the junior miners, as they call it. And the junior miners don't have access to the same heavy haul transportation that the big miners have. And consequently, they are not so competitive. They have to struggle economically. And RailRunner has the opportunity, because you can bring a trailer, let's say, to a few miles, or a few kilometers from the mine, take the trailer off, go to the mine, get the coal, bring it back to the rail. These people have a tremendous opportunity to grow their business and to become more competitive. And you can take that concept and just apply it in a whole bunch of different vertical markets and envision the economic impact that we can have.
Yeah, so I called them truckers, and I think I should have said road freighters.
Well, they're logistics. This is logistics. They're logistics companies. Okay. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that RailRunner does not compete with these companies. What we're doing, all these logistics companies, whether it's in the coal business or the fast-moving consumer goods, whether it's Imperial Logistics or some small company down the road, we are a service to those companies. Yeah. They own the end user, and we want them to continue to own the end customer. And what we do is we say, okay, you pick up that freight, and instead of driving it 1,400 kilometers from Cape Town to Gauteng, you can take it a couple of kilometers to the rail, put it on the rail, and then your Imperial Logistics road hauler in Johannesburg can pick it up and deliver it to the end user.
I really think that this is actually the solution that Transnet has been looking for in terms of, shifting its road to rail strategy. I think it enables that. And in my mind, I still think it is as simple as driving on and driving off the other side. Sorry. But I think that's the simplicity in it, the value actually in it.
Yeah, the value is that the terminals are less expensive. A traditional intermodal terminal can have a cost of, let me use the US, 50 to 100 million, or sometimes $200 or $300 million, depending upon the size of the terminal. A RailRunner terminal is somewhere between $1 million and $5 million. So the capital barrier to expanding rail, whether we're talking about South Africa or whether you're talking about the sub-Saharan African countries that desperately need this sort of transportation, this is revolutionary. Okay. Yes. The second thing is that the combination of the trailers and the bogies are more cost effective than the traditional rail wagons themselves. And then thirdly, the drive on, drive off that you just mentioned a couple of seconds ago is very efficient and safe. So overall, this has a broad ability to change logistics in South Africa and Southern Africa in general.
So can I just clarify a few points before we move on?
Yes.
You asked a question about SADC.
Yes.
Firstly, there is a thing called a SADC rail agreement. And if your products have not been certified by Transnet for rail, in South Africa, you can't run on rail in Mozambique, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia.
True.
So that's just one point to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, Transnet are looking for a solution like this to move their freight from road to rail. If you look at Transnet, they are world class at hook and haul. On the coal line, they don't load the train, they don't unload the train. On the ore line, they don't load the train, they don't unload the train. Yet, hundreds, if not thousands of people come to the heavy haul conferences in South Africa to learn from Transnet how it's done, because they are so good at it. And all that's happening now is Transnet are going to use their world-class hook and haul knowledge and skills on domestic freight. They're not going to load the train. They're not going to build the train. RailRunner will do that. They're not going to break the train. They're not going to deliver the train. They are going to stick to their core business of hook and haul. And that's what I believe makes this a world-class partnership.
Okay, so we've spoken about Paramount Trailers. We have spoken about TMH Africa. Simtech?
With the mechanical group at Transnet in Pretoria with Robert Froling and his team, we developed what we call a step-by-step matrix. It's many steps that we go through from a technical viewpoint that allows Transnet to understand that this is going to be a safe and useful system operating on their network. And one of those steps is to do computer modeling of the train to determine that it is strong enough and that it is dynamically balanced in a safe manner, so that when the train goes around curves or up and down hills or other circumstances like that, under various conditions of acceleration and deceleration, for example, emergency braking, that the train is stable and will be safe. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Simtech is a company that specializes in dynamic modeling. I think they do it for rail, but they also do it for other industries as well. So, and we have had our technology modeled in the US by other companies that specialize that here. And generally speaking, you always want to do this with a third party company, because it's a verification of your design. In other words, they can look at it analytically, dispassionately, and precisely, and then transmit that information to Transnet that it's doing well or it's not doing well, et cetera. And so one of the things that we were able to announce and able to bring to the SARS meeting that we had in Pretoria last November is that the progress with Simtech has been excellent, and the results have been excellent. So we've got that behind us. And we're moving forward, and that's really the issue there. And by the way, they're a great company, Simtech.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I'm very excited. I know Mike is very excited. Mike has organized this whole business very adroitly, if I can use that term. Over the past number of years, put his major portion of his life into it. We are very pleased to have to be able to announce that we have a strong BE partner it's a company called TechnoRail. Mike, I don't know if you want to say a couple of words about our BE partner.
TechnoRail is comprised of two different empowerment groupings. The one is Menston Industrial Holdings, and that's headed up by Mr. Zamani Jali, ex-Total, ex-EMI. He's been a lawyer in industry for many years. And the other grouping is SmartVest. SmartVest is Becky Sabia, who's been at Transnet, who's been at SIA, PPC Cement, all over the place. And his one partner is Ian Bird, and we've actually got Ian Bird to accept the position in the future of running the operations company. He has run the coal line. He knows it inside out. He he is an operator, and he has agreed to do the operations for us. So that's our BE partners. They currently own 13% of RailRunner South Africa, and so they have an option to acquire a further 13%, which will bring them up to 26%. And these are not window dressers, these are value add partners. We have an exco meeting at 9:30 every Monday morning, and all of those guys participate, and they are hands-on in driving the company forward.
Mike, I think if you could just touch on, certainly with your experience in intermodal, just touch on some of the high-level positives here. I know we've discussed some of them, and but just to give it some context from your experience.
The main benefit of intermodal is to get trucks off the road and onto rail. It's an economic benefit. There are a lot of benefits, but the basic benefit is economic, because if you're driving, let's say, the 1,400 kilometers from Cape Town to Gauteng, then and you have 100 trucks a day going up there, that's 100 tractors and 100 drivers, right? If you can get that business onto rail, then you've got maybe 1 or 2 drivers in the train. You have 1 traction engine, meaning the locomotive, and you save on labor, you save on fuel, it's more efficient. Now, the fact that you're saving on fuel has a huge benefit socially, because it means that you're not paying for the expensive fuel in the first place. In the second place, you're generating much less carbon. My understanding is that there's upcoming a carbon tax in South Africa that's going to start next year or the year after. Expression that we use in the U.S. and Mike will have to translate this into metric because I don't remember the metric numbers. But
that's fine. But I think Mike mentioned to me the last time we were on the phone the carbon emission reduction, was substantial in terms of savings.
You can in the U.S. we say you can move a ton of freight 476 miles on 1 gallon of fuel, and if you're going to do that on the road, you can only go about 120 miles. And we have all that data in metric. Mike can share that with you. So it's like a 75% reduction in carbon contribution. So multiply this by the traffic that's going in all of the major corridors in South Africa, and you can see a huge savings in carbon production. And what does that also mean? That means that the logistics companies themselves, remember I said that these logistics companies that are doing this business today are not our competitors, they're our customers. So by moving to rail, they're also going to be able to defer the carbon tax and make a savings that way and be more competitive. So this whole idea of making the logistics industry more competitive means there's benefits for the consumers and there's benefits for South Africa as an economic power in the world.